Welcome back to Under Baobab Skies. Tonight, we delve into the secrets that flowed with the Congo River traders. The Congo River is a living serpent, long, coiled, and ancient. It winds through thick forests and restless lands, whispering the stories of those who once risked their lives along its endless bends. In the days before steamships and colonial maps, this river was both a blessing and a curse, a road made of water, glistening with promise, yet hiding 1,000 perils beneath its surface. The men and women who traded along it were more than merchants. They were navigators of myth, interpreters of danger, and diplomats of survival. Each journey down the river was a wager with nature itself against crocodiles, fever, bandits, and rival tribes whose moods shifted like the currents. Yet still they went, because somewhere beyond the next bend lay profit, power, or the whispered reward of destiny. Let's slow our minds. The fire is lit, the night hums with cicadas, and somewhere the Congo murmurs its endless song. For centuries, this river was the spine of Central Africa, feeding trade routes that carried salt, copper, ivory, beads, and human lives. Villages along its banks became ports of rumor and wealth. Chiefs sent out canoes filled with gifts, warriors, and envoys. Families watched the horizon, hoping their traders would return before the rainy season drowned the roads again. But the Congo was never a simple trade route. It was a living trial, a wild teacher that broke the arrogant and shaped the wise. To sail her waters meant facing both the wrath of nature and the politics of men. So tonight, we journey back into that watery labyrinth, through danger, diplomacy, and the quiet courage of those who made their living on the river that never sleeps. You're listening to Under Baobab Skies, and the story begins now. To understand these traders, you must first understand their world. Imagine a time when maps were not printed on paper but etched into memory, passed down from father to son. The river was a living entity with its own moods and tempers. The rapids had names, often born from tragedy, the eater of canoes, the place where the spirits shriek. Every landmark, from a giant silk cotton tree to a strangely shaped rock, was a signpost in this vast green wilderness. The primary vessel for this trade was the pirogue, a canoe carved from a single, massive tree trunk. These weren't small boats. Some could carry dozens of people and tons of cargo, propelled by the rhythmic chanting and powerful strokes of skilled paddlers. A journey that takes mere hours by modern transport could last weeks, even months. Time was measured not by clocks, but by the rising and falling of the sun, the phases of the moon, and the swelling of the river itself. The goods they carried were the lifeblood of kingdoms. From the deep interior came precious ivory, hunted by skilled trackers. From the mines of the copper belt, ingots of copper were shaped into distinctive, cross-like forms, used as a form of currency across the basin. Salt, a vital preservative and a luxury, was painstakingly harvested from salt pans or traded from the coast. And in return, coastal traders brought beads from Europe, textiles from afar, and later, the firearms that would irrevocably alter the balance of power. But this wasn't just about goods. It was about information. A trader arriving in a village was a living newspaper. They brought news of births and deaths in distant clans, warnings of war or famine, and tales of powerful new chiefs or strange new visitors. Their arrival was an event, a moment when the world outside the village came rushing in, carried on the currents of the great river. They were connectors, weaving a web of human interaction across a seemingly impenetrable landscape. The social currency was just as important as the copper crosses. A successful trader had to be a master diplomat, They needed to know which chief demanded a tribute of cloth, which one preferred beads, and which one required the trader to share a meal and stories before any business could be done. A misstep, a sign of disrespect, could mean the confiscation of all your goods, or worse. Alliances were forged through marriage, through shared rituals, and through the careful exchange of gifts. Trust was the most valuable commodity of all, and it was earned over generations. Think of the risks. Every day brought new challenges. A sudden storm could capsize a fully laden pirogue, sending a fortune to the riverbed. Hippos, fiercely territorial, could splinter a canoe with a single bite. And then there were the human dangers. Rival trading groups competed for control of key stretches of the river. Bandits lay in wait at narrow channels. A village that was friendly on the journey downriver might be hostile on the way back. Its allegiance shifted by a new chief or a whispered rumor. Disease was a constant companion. Malaria, sleeping sickness carried by the tsetse fly, and countless other fevers lurked in the water and the air. Every trader knew the herbs and remedies passed down through their lineage, but many journeys ended in a lonely grave on the riverbank, far from home. This was a profession for the brave, the resilient, and the incredibly savvy. Yet, despite all this, the trade thrived. It created immense wealth for certain kingdoms, like the Luba and Landa empires, whose power was built on their control of the trade routes. It fostered a unique riverine culture, a shared identity among those who lived and died by the Congo's rhythms. The river was their highway, their marketplace, and their sacred space, all at once. As we sit here, under these imagined baobab skies, let's honor the memory of these forgotten entrepreneurs. They weren't just moving goods, they were stitching a continent together, one paddle stroke at a time. Their courage and ingenuity laid the foundations for the societies that would follow. Thank you for joining me on this journey tonight. If you enjoyed this story, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Under Baobab Skies for more tales from the heart of history. Your support allows us to keep these stories alive. Until next time, may your nights be peaceful and your skies be clear. You are now under Baobab Skies, and the story begins now. Have you ever wondered what it was like to be a Congo River trader long before the world knew its name? By the end of this journey, you'll understand why it was both a mark of immense pride and a sentence of profound suffering. The Congo is not like other rivers. It doesn't flow gently, it snarls, it leaps, and it crashes with untamed power. It coils through dense jungles that choke the air with oppressive heat and hum with the constant sound of unseen life. To survive it, traders had to memorize her moods, where she whispered secrets, where she roared in fury, and where she drowned men without a whisper of warning. Before maps were drawn by outsiders, before European explorers carved their colonial lines across the continent, African traders already knew her intimately. They traveled in long, magnificent dugout canoes, each carved from a single giant tree. Some of these vessels were so large they could hold up to 30 paddlers, armed guards, and merchants, all crowded among woven baskets stacked high with precious goods. The journey began deep in the upper reaches of the river, near the villages of the Luba, Mongo, or Tik peoples. From there, it wound its way downstream toward the lower Congo, where powerful merchant chiefs controlled the bustling river ports. This trip could take weeks, sometimes even months, depending on the season and the ever-changing temper of the waters. Picture this. At the first light of dawn, the traders push away from the shore, mist still clinging to the water's surface. Their muscles strain in a synchronized rhythm, the only sounds, the steady slap of paddles, and the occasional hiss of the current. The canoes glide forward in a disciplined silence. But just when the river seems calm, a distant rumble grows louder. The first rapids appear. The rapids of the Congo are merciless. Experienced traders learned to read the river's tone, a subtle change in its pitch, a sudden vibration felt through the hull of the canoe. It was a language of survival. One wrong move, one moment of inattention, and the canoe would twist violently, smash against hidden rocks, or flip, sending its entire cargo into the churning water. Precious salt would dissolve into the foam, and gleaming copper would sink into the shadows, lost forever. As they navigated these treacherous passages, the traders sang. They sang low, rhythmic chants that matched the powerful strokes of their paddles. Some songs were prayers to the river spirits, asking for safe passage. Others were tributes to ancestors who had perished along this very route. Their haunting melodies would echo across the water, like memories that refused to drown. Let's pause here for a moment. Imagine we're sitting by a fire, the flames crackling softly as we rest beneath a canopy of brilliant stars. The river is quiet, for now, but beyond the fury of the rapids, another, more insidious danger awaited. The fever. The Congo Basin was, and still is, a kingdom of insects. Mosquitoes carried malaria, and the bite of the tsetse fly brought sickness to both man and beast. It was inevitable that many traders would fall ill along the way. The stronger ones, driven by duty and the promise of profit, pushed on. The weaker ones were left behind in makeshift camps, tended to by companions who hoped the spirits would spare them. When sickness struck, it changed the entire rhythm of travel. The steady paddling slowed to a crawl. The powerful songs faded into weak murmurs, and an anxious silence filled the air, thick with superstition. In hushed voices, traders would whisper about the Ndoki malevolent river spirits or witches that demanded payment for safe passage. They would cast offerings into the dark water beads, copper rings, or smoked fish, their small splashes vanishing into the darkness, a desperate plea for mercy. Yet, even the terror of fever and angry spirits was not the worst danger they faced. There were pirates, river bandits from rival clans who laid ambushes in narrow, winding channels. They moved like ghosts in the night, their bodies painted with ash, striking from the shadows of the dense riverbanks. To face them was a true test of courage. Sometimes, trade goods were surrendered without a fight to save lives. Other times, the humid air would fill with the whistle of flying spears and the screams of men fighting for their lives. Still, the traders endured. They had to, because the river, as cruel and unforgiving as it was, remained the only path that could carry wealth across impossibly vast distances. For every man who vanished into its depths, two more were ready to take his place, driven by hunger, by ambition, or by the command of their chief. Let's pause here again. The night deepens around us. The wind shifts, carrying the scent of approaching rain. At certain ports along the river, the dangers shifted from the natural world to the world of politics. Each river kingdom had its own powerful rulers, chiefs, who controlled access to the best landing sites and demanded tribute before any trading could begin. Traders learned to approach these ports with humility, bowing low and presenting gifts of fine cloth or iron tools. A failure to show proper respect could mean imprisonment or, worse, simply disappearing without a trace. You see, the Congo was an empire of etiquette as much as it was a crucible of survival. The power of a single word, a subtle gesture, or a wrongly timed greeting could determine whether your goods were successfully sold or confiscated on the spot. Sometimes, when two canoes met on the open water, their leaders would raise their paddles in a silent salute. If one refused to lower his paddle first, it was seen as a sign of arrogance, direct challenge, an invitation to conflict. In this world, diplomacy became as essential a skill as the muscle needed to paddle against the current. As the older traders often said, the river teaches the tongue to be patient before the paddle moves. It was a profound truth. No deal and no journey could ever succeed without careful, measured speech. Let's rest a moment more. Listen closely. You can almost hear the hum of insects in the air, the gentle creak of wooden canoes rocking against the current. But beneath all of this, the fever, the danger, the intricate diplomacy, there was an unshakable sense of pride. A Congo trader was a man respected, feared, and sometimes envied. He was a man who had seen the world's curves, faced its dangers, and returned alive. When he finally arrived back in his home village, people would gather around, eager to hear his tale of stories of rivers that roared like lions, of distant towns where people spoke languages he could only half understand, of strange goods and even stranger beliefs. And always, he would begin his story the same way. The river remembers everything, even the dead. For the Congo trader, survival wasn't about luck. It was a combination of skill, ritual, and a deep, profound respect for the power of the river. He didn't seek to conquer it. He listened to it, he learned from it, and in doing so, he became a part of its eternal story. Let's pause here one last time. The embers of our fire glow low, and the night sighs through the trees. The river sleeps but never fully, and tomorrow at dawn our trader will rise again, ready to face her moods anew. Imagine pushing a canoe into the dense, winding waters of the Congo. You're not just entering a river, you're stepping into a labyrinth of shifting kingdoms, unspoken languages, and invisible borders. Every bend in the current introduces new rules, new dangers. Each village clinging to the bank belongs to someone, a powerful chief, a tight-knit clan, a revered spirit, or sometimes a ruthless warlord. To move your goods through these waters was to perform a delicate dance on a political tightrope, constantly balancing tribute, trade, and sheer survival. The river had no single master, from the misty upper reaches near Kisangani all the way down to the sprawling estuaries beyond Boma. Dozens of powers claimed their own slice of its flow. In one stretch, traders from the Luba kingdom might greet you with songs and offer palm wine, their smiles genuine, but just a few miles downstream, a rival village would be waiting, weapons in hand, demanding a toll to pass. To make it through alive, a trader had to learn the art of reading silence, how to offer a smile even when gripped by fear, and when to vanish into the darkness before dawn. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire crackles softly, and we rest beneath the stars. Piracy was a constant shadow, a spectre that moved with the morning mist. Some pirates were simply desperate men farmers whose crops had withered, or young warriors chasing a shortcut to wealth. But others were professionals, cogs in a vast network that stretched across countless river towns. They had spies planted in the ports, watching and waiting, tracking the movement of valuable canoes. When they struck, it was like a crocodile attack. Silent, sudden, and often fatal. A common, cruel trick was to light fires on a hidden shore at night, mimicking the warm glow of a friendly trading village. When weary traders steered their canoes toward the light, seeking rest, they were met instead with a hail of spears and arrows. Those who survived this ordeal learned a hard lesson. Never trust the fire that burns too early or shines too bright. Among the most feared were the river bandits of the Mindum region. These men were notorious for coating their bodies in pale, ghostly ash before an ambush. They believed it rendered them invisible to the river spirits, who might otherwise punish them for disturbing the sacred peace of the waters. Still, not every danger came from lawless hands. Often, The greatest threat came from the very chiefs who were meant to keep order. Along major ports like Isangila or Mbanzingongu, powerful rulers demanded tribute for every single boat that dared to land. Traders had to part with precious cloth, ivory, or copper just for the privilege of unloading their goods. Some chiefs even taxed the simple act of sleeping on their shora payment in salt or beads to ensure you wake up safely at dawn. Yet, this tribute system had a deeper purpose. It wasn't just about greed. It was the river's own form of diplomacy, ritualized exchange that acknowledged a chief's sovereignty and helped build a fragile, temporary peace. To give tribute was to show respect. To refuse was a grave insult, an act that could unleash violence disguised as justice. Let's pause here for a moment. The night hums with the river's slow, ancient rhythm, and the flames of our fire flicker against old memories. Whispers were shared around campfires, telling stories of traders who thought they were clever enough to avoid paying their dues. One man, remembered in riverside villages as Kabando, the Proud, tried to sneak past a chief's territory by traveling under the cover of night, but the river itself betrayed him. The moonlight glinted on his canoe, and the silver flash of his oars caught the eye of the watchman hidden in the shadows. His goods were seized, his companions were never seen again, and his name became a stark warning passed down through generations. The river keeps no secrets. Politics also flowed through bloodlines and marriages. The most successful traders didn't just survive. They thrived by forming strategic alliances. They would marry local women, offer lavish gifts to influential families, and carefully weave themselves into the complex kinship webs of the river communities. These unions were intensely practical. A marriage to the daughter of a river chief could grant a man safe passage and invaluable protection. In return, the chief gained status, prestige, and access to new and exotic goods from distant lands. This was the quiet, subtle diplomacy of the Congo. Not treaties written on paper, but promises sealed in blood, in shared feasts, and in stories told around a flickering fire. Let's pause again. The rain begins to whisper through the leaves. The traders tighten their cloaks, and we listen to the steady heartbeat of the forest. When two river chiefs sought peace, they didn't send letters. They sent canoes, laden with symbolic gifts, blocks of salt, bundles of dried meat, and gleaming copper bracelets. The messengers would arrive singing songs of goodwill, bearing intricately carved staffs that represented their peaceful intentions. But when that peace was broken, those same staffs might be publicly burned, a clear and unmistakable declaration of war. The Congo River, in this way, was both a road and a mirror, reflecting the ambitions, fears, and alliances of everyone who traveled it. In some seasons, the biggest threat wasn't from pirates or politics. It was the river itself. Sudden, violent storms could churn the calm water into utter chaos. Canoes capsized under relentless walls of rain, lightning split the sky, and the jungle roared back with deafening thunder. The survivors often whispered that the river spirits were at war, ancient beings, testing who was truly worthy to pass through their domain. Let's pause here for a moment. The fire hisses as raindrops strike its glowing edge. To endure these trials, traders turned to ritual. Before embarking on a long and dangerous voyage, they would visit the local Ngongatha spiritual healer to ask for powerful charms. Small gourds filled with sacred herbs, feathers, or smooth river stones were tied to the prow of the canoe. Some traders carved protective symbols directly into the wood, believing the spirits of their ancestors would see them and guide their journey safely. If a trader returned home, his canoes heavy with profit, he would offer a portion of his earnings to the Nganga as a sign of gratitude. It was proof that the delicate balance between man and the river had been honored. But if he failed to pay his respects, the stories warned, the river would always take its payment in another way. A sudden capsize, a raging fever, a whisper in the night that drew him too close to the current's deadly embrace. Let's pause here once more. The wind sighs through the trees, and the forest exhales its damp, earthy breath. Despite all of this, the pirates, the politics, the parrel trade along the Congo never stopped. The river's pull was simply too strong. Ivory from the deep forest, copper from the distant mines, salt from the sun-baked savannas, everything converged here, flowing like a great artery toward the Atlantic coast. To control a port meant controlling the very heartbeat of an entire region. Chiefs grew rich from this flow, but so did the clever traders who learned to navigate both of the river currents, the visible one made of water, and the invisible one made of power. In the evenings, after long days of tense negotiation, traders would sit by the shore, listening to the strange calls of night birds and the comforting crackle of cooking fires. They told stories of ambushes they'd narrowly survived, of clever chiefs they'd outwitted, of debts paid in strange and unexpected ways. And every tale, no matter how different, always ended the same way, with a slow nod and a knowing half-smile. The river always remembers. The Congo River demanded everything from a person's strength, humility, cunning, but it also gave everything in return: wealth, knowledge, and a profound sense of belonging to something vast, ancient, and alive. To trade upon its waters was to join a long lineage of those who spoke the river's unique language of patience, tribute, and deep respect. Let's pause one more time. The embers of our fire fade. The forest settles into a deep quiet, and somewhere far away, the river continues to whisper its secrets through the night. The Congo River is more than just a winding path of water cutting through the heart of Africa. It is a mirror reflecting the depths of the human soul. For the traders who once navigated its long, trembling currents, the river carried far more than ivory, salt, or copper. It carried the immense weight of their dreams, the ache of homes left far behind, and the melodies of songs that tried to make sense of a life defined by distance and danger. There's a reason they called it the river that remembers, because while it never stopped moving, it never ever forgot the stories entrusted to its waters. No matter how hardened or clever a river trader became, the profound silence of the African night would always find him. Long after the communal fires dwindled to embers and the rhythmic pulse of drums faded into the jungle's hum, men would sit, staring into the impenetrable darkness. Their thoughts would drift back home to the comforting smell of cassava roasting, the joyous sound of children chasing goats through the village, the gentle softness of a loved one's voice singing a lullaby. Weeks, sometimes months, spent on the river had a way of turning cherished memories into a persistent, dull ache. To travel so far from everything you knew was to risk forgetting the very things you loved most. And yet, to survive the Congo's demanding routes, you had to harden your heart. You needed quick hands and a focused mind. Love was a luxury few could afford, and softness, they knew, could drown a man faster than any rapids. To combat this creeping loneliness, some traders carried small, precious charms from home: a lock of a child's hair, a tiny piece of carved ivory, or a simple shell blessed by their mother's hand. In the quietest moments, they would whisper to these tokens, grounding themselves against the overwhelming vastness. Others sang quietly to the night songs, not meant for profit or pride, but for pure remembrance. One such song became legendary in the oral tales passed along the river, a haunting melody that captured the essence of their journey. It went, The river takes, the river gives. My heart floats with the ones I miss. If I die before I see the shore, tell my village I am water now. It was said that this song had the power to calm even the fiercest waters, as if it were the river's own favorite prayer. The Congo was a place of immense riches, but it was also relentlessly cruel. It offered its treasures freely, but it often demanded a heavy price in return, flesh and blood. Men didn't only die from the sudden violence of conflict. More often, they fell to the slow, creeping betrayals of fever, dysentery, and the sheer weight of despair. The humid, heavy air carried more than the scent of the jungle. It was thick with malaria, sleeping sickness, and the sharp, suffocating bite of grief. When sickness struck, it did so without warning, turning a strong, vibrant man into a fading ghost within a matter of days. And when rival groups met on the water, the delicate balance of trade could shatter into war in an instant. Arrows would whistle through the air, wooden canoes would splinter under attack, and the river would drink deep, its brown waters stained with red. When a man fell, whether to illness or to violence, his comrades did not bury him in the earth. They offered him back to the river. The burial rite was brief, but profoundly sacred. A coin placed on his chest for the journey ahead, a libation of palm wine poured onto the surface, and a short, solemn chant to guide his spirit home. To die on the Congo was not to be lost, but to be carried forever, your soul, tangled in its eternal current, your name whispered in the foam of its waves. As the older, wiser traders would say, don't fear the water, fear being forgotten. To live with the river was to live in the presence of something divine. It demanded respect, not control. Over generations, the traders began to see it not just as a waterway, but as a god in its own right, a powerful entity that tested the worth of every soul it carried. Each tribe along its banks had a different name for it, Enza D, Xmalongo, or Enza A, but they all translated to a similar meaning, the endless mother. Before any journey began, traders would make offerings, cola nuts, beads, or a few drops of precious oil poured onto the surface, praying for safe passage. Some spoke to the river as one would a lover, whispering, "Carry me home when my time comes." This deep reverence shaped a distinct moral code among the traders, an unwritten law that governed their lives on the water. They believed, with unwavering conviction, that you must never cheat another trader, for the river sees all transactions. You must never curse the current, for it carries your very breath. And you must never, ever travel without a blessing, for unblessed journeys always end in silence. This wasn't religion, as we might understand it, with temples and idols. It was a lived reverence, expressed through behavior. Honor, humility, and courage were the true rituals. Stories were told of traders who dared to break these codes and simply vanished without a trace. People said the river took them not out of vengeance, but as a lesson. One famous folk tale spoke of a trader named Bumba, a proud and arrogant man who mocked the spirits and endlessly boasted of his own luck. He refused to share his profits with his crew, and when the elders warned him that his greed offended the river, he just laughed. That very night, a storm rolled in. The next morning, his canoe was found empty, his goods scattered on the banks, and his paddle floating upright in the calm water. The elders nodded gravely and said, "The river does not drown, it remembers, because the river both gave life and took it away." It became the trader's ultimate conscience. Its shifting moods seemed to mirror their own, gentle and placid in the morning, turbulent and violent by dusk, then calm and reflective again under the moon. When tempers flared between rival crews, an elder would often step in and say, "Wait until the river cools." Arguments and disputes were paused until dawn. when the rising mist served as a reminder that everything turbulent, no matter how chaotic, must eventually settle. These unwritten laws created a powerful unity among men from different clans, who spoke different languages and served different kingdoms. The river made them one people, bound by a shared respect and a common struggle. Even later, when colonial intrusion began to change the landscape, when European trading stations appeared along the banks demanding tribute and obedience, the old traders quietly kept the river's laws. They may have lost control of their markets, but they never surrendered their reverence. The spirit of the Congo, its deep, ancient wisdom, remained theirs alone. By the time they reached the end of their long route at the bustling ports where goods were finally sold and news from home awaited many, traders were no longer the same men who had left months before. They had been carved by danger and shaped by devotion. Some found redemption in its waters, others found peace, but all of them found the river inside them, a current that would flow within their souls forever. The Congo River was never just a line on a map. It was a vast emotional landscape, one that demanded courage not only to trade, but to feel. For every tusk of ivory or slab of salt that changed hands, there was a quiet prayer whispered, a tear hidden from view, a song of longing carried downstream on the current. And perhaps even now, when night falls over its wide black waters, if you listen closely, you can still hear those echoes, the faint chorus of traders calling out to home their hearts, forever beating with the timeless rhythm of the river. It's true what they said. The river remembers. As dawn's first light spills gold across the water, the Congo River stirs like a sleeping giant. Along its banks, traders emerge from their canoes, stretching limbs stiff from a long night on the water. They begin to load their treasures, preparing for the day ahead. The river is waking up, and when the river wakes, an entire continent begins to move. This isn't just a simple route of water. The Congo is a vital artery of exchange, pumping wealth, stories, and culture through the veins of Africa's vast green heart. Its powerful currents carry everything from the necessities of survival to the dreams of ambition. For centuries, this river has been the central highway for commerce, connecting distant communities and shaping the destinies of empires. So, what exactly was being traded along this magnificent waterway? Imagine the scene. From the highlands near what we now call Katanga came the reddish glint of copper. This precious metal was skillfully hammered into beautiful bracelets, ornate rings, and sharp ceremonial blades. Each piece a testament to the artisan's craft. From deep within the forest villages came salt, a commodity as valuable as gold in the humid interior where preserving food was a matter of life and death. The powerful savanna kingdoms sent their prized ivory-long, elegant tusks curved like the smiles of sleeping ancestors, destined for distant markets. In return, goods from the coast made their way inland, vibrant. Colorful cloth, sparkling glass beads, and sturdy metal tools that would transform daily life. But we must also acknowledge the darker shadows of this history. Alongside the copper and ivory, the river carried an unspoken cargo. Human captives, taken in wars or raids, they were sold downstream to merchants waiting near the Atlantic coast. The same current that carried such beauty and prosperity also bore witness to immense cruelty. The river held both the light and the dark of human history within its flow. Every bend in this immense river seemed to hide a bustling marketplace, a vibrant pulse point where goods, gossip, and ideas changed hands. In the upper reaches lay the city we now know as Kisangani, once called Stanley Falls. But long before any European explorer arrived, it was a vital meeting ground for traders from the forest and the savannah. This was where the great, long canoes arriving from the east met those coming from the western bend, creating a melting pot of cultures and commerce. The air would have been thick with the smells of smoked fish, spices, and damp earth, and alive with the sounds of a dozen different languages haggling over prices. Further downstream, the town of Mbandaka buzzed with the energy of barter. Imagine women gracefully balancing carved gourds filled with rich palm oil on their heads, while men unloaded heavy coils of copper and bundles of goat hides from their boats. It was a place of constant motion, where the rhythm of trade was the rhythm of life itself. And then, near the river's mouth, stood Boma. This town became a crucial gateway to the sea, the point where African trade networks finally met the vast Atlantic world. It was here that local goods were exchanged for foreign imports, and where Africa's economic pulse could be felt by ships arriving from across the ocean. Each of these towns had its own unique rhythm, its own distinct personality. Kisangani's soundtrack was the constant hum of iron hammers shaping metal and the low murmur of conversations about the price of salt. Mbandaka was a place of celebration, filled with the sounds of drums and joyous laughter echoing over the water. Boma, on the other hand, was defined by the whistle of the ocean wind and the unfamiliar sound of foreign tongues spoken by sailors from distant lands. Together, all these different sounds and rhythms created a grand symphony, the living, breathing sound of Africa's commerce. Trade on the Congo wasn't a constant, year-round affair. It was a living calendar, deeply tied to the seasons and the moods of the river itself. When the heavy rains came, the river would swell, flooding its banks and making travel dangerous, if not impossible. During this time, the great canoes were pulled ashore and rested. Villagers would take this opportunity to repair their fishing nets, mend their tools, and offer prayers for patience and a safe return to the water. It was a time of waiting, of preparation. But as soon as the floodwaters began to retreat, the trading season would burst open with renewed energy. The canoes, carefully maintained, were polished until they gleamed. Drums would sound throughout the villages, announcing the departure of the first trading expeditions. With shouts of excitement and hope, the traders would push their heavily laden boats off from the muddy banks and into the current. There was a saying among the people of the river: "The river sleeps during the rains and opens its arms in the dry months." This wasn't just a simple observation about the weather. It was a profound understanding of the delicate balance with nature. The traders learned to follow the river's moods as if it were a living, breathing being. They knew its currents, its hidden sandbars, and its quiet eddies. Their success, and indeed their survival, depended on this intimate relationship with the water. They didn't fight the river, they moved with it, respecting its power and embracing its generosity. And so, after a long, arduous journey, as the first stars began to appear in the vast night sky, the traders would perform a small, simple ritual. They would pour a little palm wine or a bit of spirits into the current, a gesture of gratitude and respect. And as the offering disappeared into the dark water, they would whisper a prayer. "To the Mother of Roads, you have carried us safely again." It was a heartfelt tribute to the river that sustained them, the great artery that connected their world and carried their hopes into the future. This deep connection between people and nature is a powerful reminder of how ancient societies thrived not by conquering their environment, but by living in harmony with it. The economic impact of this river trade was immense. It wasn't just about moving goods from point A to point B. This network created wealth, fostered specialization, and built powerful kingdoms. Communities along the river became known for specific products. One village might be famous for its skilled blacksmiths, another for its high-quality pottery, and a third for its potent herbal medicines. This specialization meant that trade was not just a luxury, but a necessity. No single community could produce everything it needed, so they relied on the river to bring them what they lacked and to carry their own goods to others. This interdependence built strong social and political ties. Alliances were forged between distant groups through trade partnerships and intermarriage. A chief in a downstream village might secure a favorable deal for salt by marrying his daughter to the son of an upstream salt merchant. These connections created a complex web of relationships that helped maintain peace and stability over vast territories. The river was a conduit for diplomacy as much as it was for commerce. Of course, with wealth and power came competition and conflict. Control over key trading posts and river routes was fiercely contested. Tolls were often exacted by powerful chiefs from any canoe passing through their territory. Ambitious leaders could build empires by dominating sections of the river, using the revenue from trade to fund their armies and expand their influence. The history of the Congo Basin is filled with stories of rising and falling kingdoms, their fortunes tied directly to the flow of the river and the goods it carried. The cultural exchange that occurred along the Congo was just as significant as the economic one. As traders traveled, they brought with them not just their goods, but their languages, their beliefs, their music, and their stories. A song from a fishing village near the river's mouth could, over time, find its way hundreds of miles upstream. Its melody and lyrics adapted and changed along the journey. New artistic styles, new technologies like improved boat-building techniques, and new agricultural practices spread along this aquatic highway. The river acted as a massive cultural blender, creating a rich, diverse, and interconnected civilization in the heart of Africa. Think of the river as the continent's first internet, a network connecting thousands of disparate nodes, allowing for the rapid exchange of information and innovation. A new way of weaving a stronger fishing net, a more effective remedy for a common illness, or a captivating myth about the creation of the world. All of it traveled on the currents of the Congo. This constant flow of ideas ensured that the cultures of the basin were dynamic and constantly evolving, enriched by a steady stream of outside influences while retaining their own unique identities. This incredible system of trade, culture, and life existed for centuries, a testament to the ingenuity and resilience of the people who called the Congo Basin home. It was a world built on rhythm, respect for nature, and the unbreakable bonds of community. The river was their guide, their provider, and the very heart of their world. The Congo River was a highway, but it wasn't just shipping goods. It was moving something far more precious: people, languages, beliefs, and even love. This immense body of water, as wide and powerful as it was, didn't act as a barrier. It was a bridge, a connection point that wove the diverse communities along its banks into a single, vibrant tapestry. Think about it. At every single trading port, languages met and mingled just like the river's tributaries. A fisherman from the Mongo people, casting his nets day after day, might pick up Lingala words from a Luba trader visiting his village. He'd learn new phrases for goods, for greetings, for jokes. This wasn't a formal education. It was the natural, organic exchange that happens when people come together with a common purpose. This cultural blending went deeper than just language. It wove itself into the very fabric of family life. Imagine a young woman, known for her skill in harvesting salt, traveling upriver to trade. There, she meets a man from the Bemba people. They fall in love, and he brings with him the songs of his homeland. Soon, she's singing a Bemba lullaby to their child, a melody that has traveled hundreds of miles to find a new home in her heart. Through these intermarriages, the river created entirely new families. Families that belonged not just to one village or one tribe, but to the water itself. Their identity was fluid, just like the Congo. A child born from such a union was seen as something special, a true gift. They were called a child of the crossing. This beautiful term captured their unique position in the world. They were blessed because they could navigate both banks of the river with an innate ease, understanding the customs of both their mothers' and fathers' people. They carried stories and traditions between two worlds, acting as living bridges. These children often grew up to become the most sought-after interpreters, the most trusted guides, and the most captivating storytellers, ensuring that the vital flow of trade and culture continued for generations to come. They were the human embodiment of the river's connecting power. But the exchange wasn't limited to words and family ties. The trade routes along the Congo were also sound routes. Music traveled with the caravans and canoes. Imagine the powerful, rhythmic beat of drums invented deep in the upper Congo. That rhythm, carried by traders, would ripple outwards. Months later, you might hear it in a coastal village hundreds of miles away. It might be slightly changed, adapted with a local flair, but the core melody, the soul of it, would still be recognizable. It's like a family story, passed down through generations. It evolves, but its essence remains. Flutes, stringed instruments, and songs all embarked on this incredible journey, creating a shared soundtrack for the entire river basin. The same principle applied to the visual arts. The river was a flowing gallery of styles and symbols. A mask carved with a particular geometric pattern in one region could inspire a pottery design in another. An ivory carving, meticulously crafted deep in the forest, might influence the way a weaver hundreds of miles away incorporates patterns into their textiles. Every artist, in a way, was a trader of symbols. They borrowed, adapted, and reinterpreted ideas, creating a dynamic and ever-evolving artistic landscape. Every market wasn't just a place to buy and sell goods. It was a museum in motion, a vibrant, living exhibition of the region's collective creativity. Perhaps the most profound and enduring exchange, however, was spiritual. When traders traveled, they didn't just pack their goods, they packed their beliefs. They carried their gods, their rituals, and their ancestral stories with them. Each village along the Congo had its own guardian spirits, each tribe its sacred shrines and traditions. As people from different communities began to interact more frequently, their faiths started to mingle, to flow into one another like streams merging into a single, powerful current. This wasn't about conquest or conversion. It was a gentle, gradual blending of spiritual understanding. People discovered common ground in their reverence for the natural world and the ancestral realm. This spiritual mingling gave rise to new, shared deities who belonged to everyone. Along the Congo, people began to worship spirits with names that were a fusion of different tongues, reflecting their mixed origins. One of the most beloved of these was Mama Nzadi. Her name itself, combining elements from different languages, meant Mother River. She was seen as the protector of all travelers, fishermen, and especially children. Legends said she would appear at dusk as a serene woman made of mist, watching over those on the water. At the great, bustling market of Malibo Pool, a major hub of commerce, you would see a beautiful sight. Traders from vastly different lands, speaking different languages, would pause at the water's edge. They would pour offerings into the river for Mama and Zadia, handful of cola nuts, some precious beads, or a few drops of palm oil asking for safe passage and a prosperous journey. They believed she carried their prayers downstream faster than any human messenger could. This shared spiritual practice had a powerful effect on social dynamics. It softened old rivalries and built new bonds of trust. Think about it. When a Luba man and a Congo man, whose people might have once been rivals, could both call on the same river spirit for protection, it changed their relationship. It meant they could trade with each other without fear, trusting that a higher power watched over their interaction. Commerce was no longer just a transaction. It became a covenant, a sacred agreement built on shared faith and mutual respect. The river, through spirits like Mama Nezadi, had transformed trade into a form of communion. It created a spiritual network that was just as strong and vital as the economic one, binding the people of the Congo together in a deeper, more meaningful way. The river didn't just connect their villages, it connected their souls. Forget the image of an isolated jungle. The Congo was never a closed loop. It was a pulsating artery, a spinal cord connecting the deep heart of Africa to the coast, and, from there, to the entire world. Its currents didn't just carry water, they carried the lifeblood of empires. Imagine this. Hundreds of canoes, carved from ancient trees, paddle downriver from the interior. They converge at a vast, shimmering expanse of water known as Stanley Pool or Melebo Pool. Here, their journey transforms. The smaller vessels meet larger, more robust crafts, ready for the next leg of the voyage. These bigger ships would take the precious cargo ivory, fragrant palm oil, and gleaming copper down the final stretches of the river to bustling port cities like Boma and Matadi, right on the edge of the Atlantic Ocean. From these ports, the story of the Congo exploded outwards. Sails were hoisted, and ships laden with African wealth set course for Europe, the Americas, and the Caribbean. The world wanted what the Congo had, and the river was the conduit that delivered it. But this was never a one-way street. The river that gave so much also received. Back up the current came the wonders of a connected world. Fine, colorful cloths woven in India, delicate glass beads crafted in the workshops of Venice, and strong, sharp iron tools forged in the foundries of England. These weren't just objects, they were ideas, technologies, and new forms of beauty. They traveled inland, carried on the shoulders of porters, and in the bellies of canoes, until they sparkled in market stalls deep within the forest, hundreds of miles from the sea. This immense, continent-spanning network wasn't run by governments or corporations with written ledgers and detailed maps. It was managed by an organization that was informal yet astonishingly precise. Local chiefs controlled stretches of the river, ensuring safe passage and collecting tolls. Porters, the long-distance walkers of the trade routes, timed their arduous journeys by the movement of the stars and the maps. They weren't on paper. They were kept alive in the memories of storytellers, woven into songs and oral histories. Each verse of a song could be a direction, each refrain a landmark, a living, breathing GPS passed down through generations. An old saying captured this wisdom: when you hear the drum of the mangrove, turn east. When the moon touches the hill, rest your paddle. The river knows the way. You must only listen. The entire system was built on memory, trust, and a profound understanding of the natural world. Within this grand ballet of commerce were the unsung heroes, the silent couriers who made it all possible. There were the canoe messengers, elite athletes of the river. These men were trained from a young age to paddle for days without rest, navigating treacherous waters, guided only by the calls of specific birds or subtle shifts in the river S-current. They weren't just delivering goods, they were delivering information. A message carried by a canoe messenger could seal a peace treaty, announce the prices at a distant market, or carry a desperate warning of an impending raid. They were the internet of their day, powered by muscle and skill. Then there were the interpreters, the true diplomats of the river. They did far more than simply translate words. They negotiated understanding between cultures, bridging vast linguistic and social divides. Many were the mixed heritage children of traders who had settled along the river, growing up fluent in multiple languages and customs. They were the human bridges, ensuring that trade deals didn't collapse into misunderstandings. And finally, the porters. They were the muscle, the engine of the entire economy, walking barefoot for hundreds of miles through dense forest paths. Each man carried astonishing loads, sometimes up to 50 kilograms of goods balanced on his back or head. Their rhythmic footsteps and the songs they sang to keep pace and spirits high became the very heartbeat of the trade routes. They had a saying, "When the forest swallows our steps, we sing so it knows we are human." Their resilience and strength were the foundation upon which this entire world of trade was built. Where there is prosperity, power is never far behind. As these trade routes flourished and wealth flowed along the river, powerful kingdoms rose along its banks. The great Luba, Lunda, and Congo empires all built their strength and influence by mastering river commerce. Chiefs who controlled key ports or strategic sections of the river became incredibly wealthy and powerful. They were the gatekeepers of the flow of goods, and they skillfully converted this economic might into political and military force, building dynasties that lasted for centuries. But unity often breeds rivalry. The same river that connected people could also divide them. As kingdoms grew more powerful, they competed for control of the most lucrative routes. Disputes over access, disagreements about tolls, and shifting alliances often erupted into conflict. A blockade at a single strategic point on the river could be a devastating weapon, capable of starving entire regions of essential goods like salt or iron. The river, that great thread of connection, could quickly become a line in the sand, a weapon of war. Yet, through all the rise and fall of empires, a deeper truth endured. The Congo River itself remained stronger and more constant than any king or kingdom. It was the ultimate sovereign. Long after the great empires of the Luba and Congo had faded into history, the river's current continued its timeless journey to the sea. It kept flowing, carrying with it the essentials of life: fish for sustenance, traders seeking fortune, and the enduring faiths and beliefs of the people who called its banks home. The river was, and is, the eternal constant in the heart of Africa. To the people who lived by its banks, the Congo River was never just a road of water. It was a living, thinking being, unpredictable, deep, and ancient. To travel, it was to speak its language, and only those who truly listened could pass unharmed. They said every successful trader was part merchant, part mystic. The map wasn't on paper, lived in memory, in rhythm, in stories whispered round the fire the night before departure. Many of its channels were completely invisible to the untrained eye, where outsiders saw only a bewildering maze of water and impenetrable green. The seasoned river people, the Bangala, the Ngombe, the Tik and the Congo could read the signs as clearly as a book. A certain bend in the current meant a hidden sandbar lurked just beneath the surface. The way a bird circled overhead told of shallow rocks below. The specific color of the foam gathering on the water warned of rapids or treacherous whirlpools ahead. Their eyes were sharper than any compass. Their memory, shaped and refined by generations of repetition, had mapped every secret passage. These navigators could even travel at night, guided by the scent of certain river flowers that bloomed only in specific areas, or by the unique chorus of frogs that was distinct to each bend. Before a young trader set off on their first major voyage, an elder might pull them aside and offer this wisdom: The river does not like pride. Paddle with humility, and she will show you the way. This humility began before the first paddle even touched the water. Traders performed sacred rituals, ancient and essential. They would pour palm wine into the current, a libation to the river spirit. They murmured the names of their ancestors, asking for their guidance and protection. Offerings of cowrie shells or white clay were carefully placed at the bow of the canoe. This wasn't mere superstition. It was a negotiation. The river had moods, and one had to greet her with the respect due to a queen. If thunder rumbled in the distance, no matter how faint, the journey waited. If a crocodile surfaced near the dock, it was seen as a messenger. Its meaning, whether a warning or a blessing, was deciphered by the elders, whose wisdom connected the present to the past. Women played a vital role in these preparations. In many communities, wives or mothers would bless the canoes with oil. They would trace spirals along the wooden sides, symbols of protection. These spirals mirrored the river's own twists and turns, a constant reminder that safety came from moving with the river, not against it. It was an act of harmonizing their intentions with the river's powerful spirit. This deep connection meant that every bend of the Congo had a name, and every name held a story. There was Nzinga's Elbow, a calm pool where a legendary warrior queen was said to have bathed before a great battle. Then there were places like the Teeth of Moke, a deadly stretch of jagged rocks that had devoured countless boats over the centuries. To an outsider, these names were just coordinates on a mental map. But to the river people, they were living spirits, places with personality and memory. Elders would speak of the river in human terms. That bend laughs, they might say, of a place with playful currents. That current mourns, they would whisper about a stretch where a tragedy had occurred. Each section of the water had its own character. Some were generous, offering swift passage and abundant fish. Some were jealous, known for sudden squalls, and others were hungry, demanding caution and respect. Navigating the Congo was not just a feat of geography. It was an act of diplomacy with these invisible, powerful forces. As night fell and the canoes were moored to the bank, the river transformed. It glowed with the reflections of the moon and the countless fireflies that danced in the humid air above its surface. The traders would sit quietly, listening to the symphony of the night, the deep hum of frogs, the chirp of insects, and the faint, rhythmic sound of distant drums carrying messages across the water. In these moments of stillness, they knew that somewhere beneath the dark, shimmering surface, ancient eyes were watching. They were guests in a powerful, living world. Let's pause here for a moment, just as they did. Imagine the fire crackling softly, the immense blanket of stars above, unobscured by city lights. The river hums its low, eternal song, a sound that has carried both fortune and fear for millennia. It's in this quiet that the true meaning of their journey becomes clear. It wasn't just about moving goods from one point to another. It was about moving through a sacred space, a landscape alive with history, spirits, and power. It was a pilgrimage as much as a business trip. The morning after these nights of reflection began with the same reverence. Before pushing off, a prayer might be whispered, a fresh leaf placed on the water. The traders understood that the river they had left the day before was not the same one they were entering now. Rains upriver, a fallen tree, or a shift in the current could change everything. Their survival depended on paying attention, on being present in every single moment. This constant vigilance forged a unique kind of person, one whose senses were sharpened to an extraordinary degree. They could smell rain coming hours before it arrived. They could feel a change in the water's temperature through the wood of their paddles, signaling a confluence with a different tributary. These skills were passed down not through written manuals, but through shared experience. A young boy learning the ways of the river would sit in a canoe with his father or uncle, not just paddling, but observing. He would learn to identify hundreds of different bird calls, to know which trees attracted which insects, and how those insects, in turn, signaled the presence of certain fish. He learned the rhythm of the river's breath, the slow, steady pulse of the dry season, and the powerful, rushing heartbeat of the wet season. This knowledge was a living inheritance, more valuable than any physical treasure. It was the key to life itself in the heart of the Congo Basin. And so, the canoes would glide on, their occupants in a state of constant, fluid dialogue with the water. They were not conquering the river. They were partnering with it. They respected its power, honored its spirits, and in return, the river revealed its secrets, allowing them safe passage through its vast, mysterious heart. Their journey was a testament to a profound truth, that the deepest understanding of the world comes not from dominating it, but from listening to it with an open and humble heart. Trade on the Congo River wasn't a matter of luck or random chance. It didn't just survive, it thrived. And the secret to its success wasn't written on paper or enforced by armies. It was built on something far more powerful. Invisible webs of trust, alliances woven across generations. Here, in the heart of Africa, paper contracts meant nothing. The river's law was older than ink. Imagine a world where your word isn't just a promise, but a sacred bond, and a business partnership is sealed not with a signature, but with blood. This was the reality along the Congo. When two traders, perhaps from different chiefdoms, wanted to establish a lasting peace and a profitable relationship, they didn't call for a scribe. They performed a ritual. In a quiet ceremony, maybe under the flickering light of torches by the riverbank, they would sit together. Each would make a small cut on their wrist, just enough to draw a single drop of blood. This drop would fall into a shared cup of palm wine. Then they would drink it. This powerful act, known by names like Lukasa or Kandambanda, depending on the region, transformed them. They were no longer just business partners. They became brothers of the river. From that moment forward, their families were bound by a sacred pact of mutual aid and fair dealing. Their fates were intertwined. If one family faced hardship, the other was obligated to help. If one needed safe passage, the other guaranteed it. This wasn't a short-term agreement. It was a spiritual contract that outlived memory itself. Even after one of the original men died, his children and his children's children were expected to honor that bond. Commerce became kinship. A debt wasn't just financial. It was a matter of family honor. Can you imagine a modern corporation operating on such a principle? The entire system was built on a foundation of generational integrity. Now, picture this. You're paddling your canoe into a village you've never seen before. The people on the shore speak a language you don't understand. How do you communicate? How do you signal that you're here to trade, not to raid? Along the Congo, silence was often safer than speech. So, a complex and beautiful language of gestures and symbols emerged. This wasn't just simple hand-waving. It was a coded system, understood up and down the river. A raised paddle, held high and still, might mean we come in peace, offering a string of pure white beads before any other item could signal. We seek trade, not tribute. You weren't there to demand. You were there to exchange. The objects themselves carried messages. A particular type of shell necklace might be a universally recognized token of an existing alliance, a reminder of a blood pact made long ago. A small, carved wooden fish might signify that the trader was favored by the water spirits. a person to be respected and trusted. These symbols were the passports and the letters of credit of their time. They allowed commerce to flourish between people who shared no common tongue. A trader could arrive at a foreign shore and through this silent ballet of gestures and symbolic gifts, conduct an entire negotiation haggling over the price of salt, ivory or copper and leave, not just with goods, but as an honored guest invited to share a meal and a story. It was a testament to human ingenuity, a system of communication that transcended spoken language. So, if there were no written contracts, how did anyone keep track of it all? Who owed what? Who had fulfilled their promises? The answer lay in the most powerful repository of all, human memory. Every major market had its storytellers. These weren't just entertainers. They were the living archives of the river. These men and women held the collective memory of the community's commerce. In a rhythmic chant or a powerful song, they would recite the records of trade. Their voices would echo through the market, declaring who owed whom, which families had a history of betrayal, and which had honored every single deal since their grandfather's day. Their words were the ledger, their minds the library. To be praised in their songs was the highest honor. To be named as a promise breaker was a deep and lasting shame. Forgetfulness was dishonor. A family's reputation was its most valuable asset. When a trader passed away, his sons and daughters inherited not only his canoe and his goods, but, more importantly, his promises and his reputation. They were responsible for settling his debts and were expected to uphold the alliances he had forged. This created a powerful incentive for honesty that spanned generations. Because words carried such immense weight, lies were feared like curses. Breaking a sworn oath wasn't just bad for business. It was seen as an offense against the spiritual order of the world. A trader who cheated a partner might find his canoe mysteriously capsizing in calm waters, or his fishing nets coming up empty day after day. It was believed the river itself, the ultimate witness to all oaths, would reject him. The spirits of the water would turn against him. This unspoken, spiritual justice kept the Congo's intricate network of trade in a delicate balance. A balance that no written law or distant king could ever hope to achieve. It was a system built on honor, enforced by memory, and guaranteed by the spirits of the river itself. Let's just pause for a moment. As the drums of the market fade into the twilight, you can almost hear the water whispering a single, crucial word. Remember that one word was the foundation of it all. If you sit by the Congo long enough, you begin to hear it speak. Not in words, you understand, but in rhythms. In the thunderous crash of a distant waterfall, the gentle lapping against the shore, and the profound, heavy silences that fall between them. The river, you see, keeps stories like a grandmother who never forgets a single detail. It's a keeper of secrets, a witness to history, and a voice for the land itself. For the people who have lived along its banks for millennia, the river's actions were never random. Floods, for instance, were never seen as mere accidents of nature. They were messages. They were punishments for broken promises, renewals for a tired land, or solemn warnings from the powerful river gods who commanded the waters. When the churning, brown currents rose to swallow entire villages, the elders would gather and explain that someone, somewhere, had broken a sacred pact. Perhaps they failed to offer the proper tribute to a water spirit, or maybe an arrogant word had been spoken, insulting the unseen guardians of the river. There's a powerful tale that still echoes along the Lulonga River, one of the Congo's major tributaries. It speaks of a trader, long ago, who was having a terrible season. Frustrated and angry, he threw his entire cargo of precious salt into the water, cursing his losses and the river that had brought him such misfortune. The river listened. The very next season, the floods came higher and fiercer than anyone had ever seen. The water rose with a vengeful purpose, and the trader's home was the first to be consumed. To this very day, traders who pass that specific bend in the river will toss a handful of salt into the current. It's a small act of respect, a gesture to appease the spirit he so foolishly angered all those years ago. It's a reminder that the river always remembers. Death, too, was part of the river's constant, flowing dialogue with its people. When someone drowned, you would not hear the words, "He died." Instead, they would say, "The river called him home." It was a different way of understanding the world. To the Congo's children, the boundary between the world of the living and the world of water was incredibly thinner, shimmering, trembling veil. To be taken by the river was not just an end, but a transition, a return to the source from which all life came. It was a terrifying, yet deeply spiritual, part of existence. The river gives, and the river takes away. And just as the river had its own voice, so too did the people have their own way of speaking back to it. Every community along its immense length had songs of the river. These weren't just tunes for entertainment. They were vital tools for survival, passed down from one generation to the next. The songs were oral maps, teaching the young where the treacherous whirlpools hid just beneath the surface, or how to recognize the subtle shift in a current that signaled danger. They contained calendars, telling fishermen when the best time to cast their nets was, or when traders should begin their long journeys to distant markets. But the songs carried more than just practical information. They were vessels for emotion. They held the deep longing of someone waiting for a loved one to return, the sharp grief for a soul the river had called home, and the fierce pride of a community that thrived on its banks. These songs were, in a very real sense, the river's diary, written not in ink, but in melody and memory. An elder might sing, in a low, cautionary voice, "Row slow when the moon hides, for the spirits dance on the dark water." This wasn't just a spooky story for children. It was navigation, it was prayer, and it was a map of the spiritual world, all woven into a single, memorable phrase. Imagine a group of traders, paddling for days on end, their muscles aching with the strain. To keep their rhythm, to push through the monotony and hardship, they would sing. Low, resonant harmonies would rise from their canoes, the sound blending with the rhythmic splash of their paddles dipping into the water. This was a way of turning hardship into art, of turning exhaustion into a shared rhythm that bound them together. Their voices became another layer in the river's soundscape, a human pulse in the heart of the great waterway. And so, the Congo became an archive. It remembered everything. Every clay pot that slipped from a woman's grasp and sank into the mud, every paddle that snapped under pressure and was tossed aside, every tear of joy or sorrow shed at its banks, all of it became part of its immense, flowing story. Long before books and written histories arrived in this part of the world, the Congo carried history in its silt, in its currents, and in its profound silences. It was the living, breathing archive of Central Africa. Think of it, the river's muddy bed holds the forgotten artifacts of entire kingdoms. Its currents have carried the stories of the rise and fall of empires, the merging of different peoples, the whispered prayers to ancient gods. It has seen generations born and generations pass, its flow remaining the one constant in a world of change. The river was witness to the first dugout canoe and the first steamship, holding the memory of both with equal impartiality, and perhaps, if you find yourself on its banks on a quiet, moonlit night, and you truly listen past the chirp of insects, and the rustle of leaves, you can still hear the echoes. The faint laughter of traders sharing a joke centuries ago. The steady, hypnotic splash of paddles from a canoe that has long since vanished. The haunting melodies of devotion, prayers sung to the river spirits, drifting like mist from another time. Let's just pause here for one last moment. Imagine the scene with me. The campfire is burning low, its embers glowing like sleepy red eyes. The great river hums its ancient, eternal song beneath the moon. And our hearts, hopefully, are a little fuller, a little heavier with the weight and beauty of these old stories. The Congo flows on, just as it always has and always will, eternal, powerful, and remembering all. Let us explore the Congo River as a source of dreams and a path for travelers. But there came a time when the Congo's waters were not just for dreamers, they became the very veins of empires. This is the story of how the river gave birth to dynasties, power, and unimaginable wealth. Imagine the port towns of Boma, Mbandaka, and Balabo, buzzing with life and ambition. Here, powerful families began to rise. They weren't just simple traders anymore, moving ivory and salt. They became the rulers of the routes, the custodians of passage, and the keepers of wealth. Their grand houses were built close enough to the river to hear its constant murmur at night. A lullaby of power, yet fortified and strong enough to keep their rivals at bay. Their names were whispered along the banks with a mixture of envy and deep reverence. Think of it. Some of these families commanded fleets of 100 canoes. These weren't just hollowed-out logs. They were sleek, painted vessels, each carved with powerful emblems of crocodiles or leopard symbols of their dominion over the water. The logistics were staggering. They paid their tireless rowers in precious salt, their ceremonial dancers in fine cloth, and their loyal guards in shells and protective charms. The wealth that flowed with them was as liquid as the river itself. Heavy copper bracelets, shining brass rods, exquisite beads brought all the way from the coast, an imported cloth that shimmered like morning dew on a spiderweb. This wasn't just trade. It was a spectacle of prosperity, a moving city of riches floating on the currents of the Congo. To control trade along the Congo was to command life itself. The chiefs of these powerful families taxed every single canoe that dared to cross their territories. It was their river, and they made sure everyone knew it. They dictated where markets could spring up and who was permitted to buy what goods. A market in one village might thrive, while another, a few miles downriver, withered, all at the whim of a powerful clan leader. In return for these taxes and this control, they offered protection. But, as you can imagine, protection and power were often two sides of the same coin, just named differently depending on who was telling the story. For a small trader, a chief's protection fee might feel a lot like a demand. For the chief, it was the price of maintaining order and security on his stretch of the river. The entire Congo basin became a complex, shifting chessboard of influence. It was a vast, interconnected network where everyone owed something to someone else. A merchant based in the bustling port of Boma might owe allegiance to a chief far upriver. That same chief, in turn, depended on ancient kinship ties to a clan hidden deep within the forest interior, who supplied him with the very goods he traded. This intricate web of trade and loyalty blurred the line between commerce and kingship. Were they merchants or were they kings? The answer was, they were both. The richest among them hosted ceremonies so grand that they became the stuff of legend. Entire villages would dance for days on end, fueled by the merchants' generosity. Their wealth was poured into the relentless rhythm of drumming that echoed across the water, into endless gourds of palm wine and into displays of silks that fluttered and danced in the humid night air. These festivals were more than just parties. They were public declarations of power, a way to show everyone just how successful and influential a family had become. They cemented alliances, intimidated rivals, and ensured that the family's name would be on everyone's lips. But beneath all the vibrant music and dazzling color, the air was always charged with an undercurrent of competition. Wealth, as it always does, invited ambition. And ambition demanded allegiance. The river was a stage for constant maneuvering and strategic alliances. Merchant clans would often marry their daughters into rival houses. These marriages were not about love. They were business transactions designed to seal pacts, forge new partnerships, or finally settle old, bitter feuds that had simmered for generations. The river itself seemed to mirror their intricate politics, calm and placid on the surface, but concealing deep, twisting currents of rivalry and intrigue just beneath. A smile between two patriarchs at a wedding feast could hide daggers of suspicion. As the centuries turned, these prominent river families began to evolve. They started to look less like trading guilds and more like small, self-contained kingdoms. They developed their own unique symbols, sent out emissaries to negotiate on their behalf, and established elaborate rituals that marked them as distinct from ordinary traders. They were a class apart. Some of the most powerful leaders even carried seals meticulously carved from ivory, stamped with their personal insignia. A document bearing that seal was law. Their words, whispered to a captain or declared in a marketplace, could open up new routes for trade or shut them down completely. Their debts and their investments could build entire towns from nothing or, if a deal went sour, drown them in financial ruin. These weren't just traders playing at being royalty. They had become the de facto rulers of the river. Their influence extended far beyond the water's edge, deep into the forests and savannas. They were the bankers, the judges, and the generals of their domains. Their canoes were not just for carrying goods. They were a navy that enforced their will. The wealth they accumulated didn't just buy luxuries. It bought loyalty, armies, and a legacy that they hoped would last forever. They were the masters of their world, a world built on the constant flow of the river. Yet, even at the height of their power, a quiet fear lingered. By night, when the campfires flickered and cast dancing shadows off the dark water, the elders of these dynasties would gather. In hushed tones, surrounded by the symbols of their immense wealth, they would whisper the same timeless truth. A fear passed down from one generation to the next. The river gives, but it never gives forever. They understood, perhaps better than anyone, that their power was not permanent. It was as fluid and unpredictable as the Congo itself. They knew that every generation of power, no matter how strong, sits on borrowed currents. A sudden shift in trade routes, the rise of a new, more ruthless rival, or a change in the desires of faraway markets could sweep their empires away as easily as a flood washes away a riverside village. This profound understanding gave their reigns a sense of urgency and, perhaps, a touch of wisdom. They lived large, but they always kept one eye on the river, knowing it was both the source of their strength and the symbol of their ultimate vulnerability. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of the river kingdoms of the Congo. It's a powerful reminder that history is often shaped not just by kings and battles, but by the flow of trade and the ambitions of those who dare to master it. Hello everyone, and welcome back to our journey along the Great Congo River. Last time, we explored the raw, untamed power of commerce that pulsed through these waters. But as any seasoned captain will tell you, navigating a river as vast and unpredictable as the Congo requires more than just a strong canoe and a heavy purse. Wealth alone could not survive the river's ever-changing moods. It needed structure. It needed ties stronger than any current, and that is where alliances became the true currency of power. This intricate dance of diplomacy, marriage, and ritual is the invisible current that truly shaped the destiny of the river's people. Imagine for a moment that every major decision, every trade deal, every political shift wasn't signed on paper, but was woven into the very fabric of family life. In the societies that flourished along the Congo, marriage was not just a matter of love or lineage. It was a negotiation table, elegantly dressed in beads and proverbs. The joining of two people was the joining of two worlds. A daughter's hand in marriage could unite to vital trade routes, instantly creating a more powerful economic bloc. A dowry wasn't just a gift. It could be the key that unlocked a previously closed port, granting access to new markets and new resources. A wedding ceremony, with all its celebration and feasting, could mark the solemn beginning of peace after years, or even generations, of quiet, simmering rivalry. It was strategy, played out with families instead of armies. In bustling centers like Boma and Mbondaka, this system gave rise to a unique riverine aristocracy. This wasn't a nobility of inherited titles and castles, but a dynamic class of merchants who were masters of adaptation. They spoke multiple dialects, allowing them to communicate and build trust across vast distances. They navigated the complex currents of both kinship and politics with equal skill, moving between villages not just as traders, but as diplomats. Every journey up or down the river was a mission, strengthening ties, gathering information, and expanding their influence. In this world, a bride brought far more than beauty or a dowry. She carried with her vital information about her own family's strengths and weaknesses. She brought loyalty, a promise that her new family's interests were now her own. And she carried the unspoken, sacred duty to protect and grow the family's fortune, ensuring its survival for generations to come. And let's be clear, women were not silent, passive figures in this grand drama. Far from it, they were the invisible merchants of diplomacy, the architects of alliances whose influence was often underestimated but absolutely critical. In many communities, women were the custodians of the family's wealth. They meticulously kept account of the ivory stores, the salt blocks, the copper ingots, the very foundations of their prosperity. They were shrewd negotiators, often using coded language, songs, and even the way they wore their jewelry to convey messages that outsiders, especially men from other clans, couldn't decipher. A seemingly innocent song sung by the riverbank could carry a warning about a coming trade rival. The arrangement of bracelets on an arm could signal agreement or refusal during a tense negotiation. In this intricate river society, a quiet whisper from a matriarch, a respected elder woman, held immense power. Her word, born of wisdom and experience, could change the fate of an entire village, averting a conflict or sealing a prosperous new alliance. The formal heart of this diplomatic world was the Council of Elders. Think of these as the river's parliament. These respected leaders, both men and women, would meet under the shade of vast, ancient fig trees or within great halls meticulously woven from reeds. These were the courts where justice was dispensed and the future was debated. Trade disputes, which could easily escalate into violence elsewhere, were settled here not with coins or force, but with the power of words. A skilled orator, someone who had mastered the art of rhetoric and proverb, could perform miracles. They could turn an admission of guilt into an act of grace, transforming a potential enemy into a grateful ally. They could reframe a burdensome debt not as a liability, but as the foundation for a new partnership. These meetings were steeped in rich ritual. Before any major decision was made, offerings of palm wine or food were poured directly into the water. It was a profound gesture of respect, as if asking the river itself to bear witness to their proceedings and to judge the fairness of their resolutions. The river was not just a backdrop. It was an active participant, a divine arbiter in the affairs of humanity. This spiritual dimension gave their decisions a weight and sanctity that a simple contract could never possess. Every agreement was blessed by the ancestors and the spirit of the river, making it a sacred pact. But sometimes, the turbulent world of trade and politics required a bond even deeper than marriage or council decree. It required a connection sealed in blood. These were the blood brotherhoods, one of the most sacred and binding alliances possible. Men from different clans, sometimes even from rival villages, would come together in a solemn ceremony. With a ritual knife, they would make small cuts on their arms and let their blood mingle together in a carved wooden bowl, often over sacred objects. By sharing blood, they became brothers, bound for life. Their oath transcended commerce. It was sanctified by the spirits of their ancestors and the powerful forces of the natural world. To betray a blood brother was unthinkable. It wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was an act that would bring a curse upon one's entire lineage, a stain that could never be washed away. This pact ensured absolute trust, creating partnerships that could withstand any external pressure. Life along the Congo was a constant balancing act. This entire system of diplomacy of marriages, councils, and blood oaths was incredibly delicate. Too much ambition, a single greedy move, and you could shatter the peace, risking a devastating war that could wipe out years of prosperity. Yet, on the other hand, too much trust, a naive belief in the goodness of a rival without the backing of a formal pact. And you risked ruin, leaving your family and village vulnerable to betrayal. It was a tightrope walk between caution and courage, suspicion and solidarity. Yet for centuries, this invisible network of diplomacy, this intricate web of human connection, is what kept the Congo River alive. It transformed what could have been a constant battlefield into a vibrant bloodstream of mutual survival, a testament to the idea that our greatest strength is not in what we own, but in the bonds we build with each other. When the colonial ships finally arrived, their captains expected chaos. A land ripe for the taking, a blank slate upon which they could write their own history. But what they found was something far more profound. They found a living, breathing economy, intricate, layered, and older than any of their fledgling empires. The foreign powers saw resources, they saw commodities, they saw trade, but the Congolese saw lineage. They saw a web of relationships woven over centuries, a tapestry of trust that connected communities up and down the river. And though these newcomers would eventually shatter many of those systems, the fundamental logic of the river, its rhythm and its wisdom, endured. Colonial rule was an exercise in replacement. It sought to swap kinship with contracts, to substitute diplomacy with decrees. The old, powerful merchant families, who had for generations commanded respect and controlled vast networks, were systematically dismantled. They were taxed into oblivion, their land and assets dispossessed, or they were reluctantly absorbed into the new, rigid hierarchies imposed by the colonial administration. The personal became impersonal. The relational became transactional. The goal was to erase the old ways of doing business and impose a new order, one that served the interests of the empire, not the people of the river. Yet, you can't simply legislate away a culture. In the hidden corners of villages, in the quiet conversations between elders, the traditions persisted. The secret pacts between families, forged generations ago, were still honored. The songs sung before a long journey, asking the river for safe passage, was still whispered into the morning mist. The deep, abiding respect for the river as the ultimate witness to all agreements, all promises, all betrayals that never faded. It was a silent rebellion, a quiet insistence that their world, their rules, still mattered. The colonialists may have owned the ledger books, but the people of the Congo still owned the memory. And if you look closely today, you'll see that modern Congo still carries the echo of that ancient structure. Walk through a bustling local market, from the Grand Marche Central in Kinshasa to the smallest riverside gathering. You'll feel the same rhythm that pulsed through those pre-colonial trade networks. You'll see cousins running stalls side by side, a testament to family loyalty. You'll find uncles managing the complex logistics of transport, their authority rooted not in a corporate title but in kinship. You'll witness women, as they have for centuries, leading negotiations with a sharp mind and an intuitive understanding of the person across from them. This is the enduring truth. Commerce in the Congo has never been just about money. It's never been a cold calculation of profit and loss. It is about trust. It is about rhythm. It is about knowing, without needing to ask, who your grandmother's grandmother traded with. It's about understanding which side of the river her canoe docked on, and what that simple act signified in the grand, intricate dance of alliances and obligations. It's a social fabric as much as an economic one, where your reputation is your currency and your lineage is your credit score. The river itself remains the greatest archive of this memory. Its banks have shifted, eroded by time and development. Cities have risen where forests once stood, but its current, the powerful, steady flow of the water, still hums with an old wisdom. It carries the memory of goods moved in silence, under the cover of darkness, to evade a rival or a tax collector. It remembers the deals struck under the pale light of the moon, promises sealed not with a signature but with a shared cola nut. It remembers the love stories woven into trade routes, marriages that were as much about merging businesses as they were about uniting hearts. There's a local saying that if you stand by the Congo at dusk, just as the day surrenders to the night and the wind shifts, you can sometimes hear it. Faintly, on the breeze, the echoes of drums. Not the drums of war, but the ghosts of merchant ceremonies. The complex rhythms that once announced a successful voyage, a new partnership, or the passing of a great trading chief. These are the sounds of an economy built on celebration and ritual, a world where commerce had a soul. And so, the legacy of the Congo merchants is unfound in dusty museum archives, or in the gold and cloth they traded. Their true legacy is in continuity. It's in the quiet, stubborn endurance of connection in a world that constantly tries to pull people apart. They proved a revolutionary idea that commerce could be a form of kinship, that wealth wasn't just accumulation, but could be a ritual that strengthens community bonds. They proved that a river, a single flowing body of water, could teach an entire continent how to organize itself not with walls or with empires, but with the elegant, invisible threads of mutual trust and shared history. Even now, think about this. Every single canoe that drifts through that ancient water, every fisherman casting his net, every trader poling his way to the next market, is part of that inheritance. They are guided, perhaps unknowingly, by the same invisible map of relationships and obligations that those first great traders once followed. The river remembers everything. It has seen empires rise and fall. It has watched fortunes made and lost. It has carried the songs of celebration and the whispers of sorrow. And it keeps its secrets well, holding the memory of a civilization built not on stone, but on water. As the night deepens, the Congo stretches out like a dark mirror beneath a blanket of stars. If you listen long enough, truly listen, you might hear more than just the flow of water. You might hear the hum of centuries, the quiet murmur of paddles, the distant laughter of traders long gone, their songs carried downstream and woven into memory. This river, like all great storytellers, never rushes its tale. It curls, it doubles back, it lingers. It remembers everything. The hands that rode it, the lives it claimed, the bargains it witnessed, and the prayers whispered along its edges. It is a history written not in books, but in currents. Long before maps carved its course onto paper, the Congo was a living archive. Every bend in the river was a sentence. Every rapid was a punctuation mark. For the traders, fishermen, and families who lived along its banks, reading its surface was like others read scripture. Each eddy, each floating leaf was a sign from the ancestors. To move along this river was to become part of a conversation older than any king or any border, and through this, the river taught its people a profound paradox. To travel forward, you must surrender control. To arrive at your destination safely, you must first learn to trust the flow. It was never just a path to riches. It was a teacher of humility. Those who treated it merely as a tool, something to be conquered, often vanished into its depths. But those who honored it, who understood its power and its spirit, became legends. To the Congolese people, the river was never just geography. It was spirit in motion, a deity that both fed and tested them. In its vastness, the Congo revealed a truth about Africa that outsiders often overlooked. Commerce and spirituality were never separate things. A deal struck between two traders could also be a sacred vow. A long voyage could be a pilgrimage. A simple canoe could carry both precious cargo and heartfelt prayer. Through this living water, Africa built its own form of globalization long before the word even existed. It was a network of exchanges, languages, and loyalties that completely defied colonial logic. From the highlands near Kisangani to the delta at Boma, the Congo connected hundreds of ethnic groups: the Mango, the Tio, the Yaka, the Luba, the Engel, into one vast, interconnected conversation of survival and prosperity. The Europeans who came later called it chaotic. But chaos, in the river's tongue, simply means alive. When the colonial empires arrived with their guns, their flags, and their ledgers, they believed they were bringing civilization to a wild, untamed land. Yet what they found was already a civilization fluid, complex, and interdependent, sustained not by walls but by waves. Every port was a parliament. Every canoe was an embassy. Every single transaction was a story waiting to be told. They simply didn't understand that in the Congo, wealth wasn't something you accumulated and hoarded. It circulated just like the water itself. And when they tried to dam that current, both literally and spiritually, they broke something precious they could never truly rebuild. But still, the river endured. It always does. Today, when massive cargo ships glide through its modern ports, they move silently above invisible ghosts, the ancient trade routes carved by canoes long forgotten. When modern traders bargain in the bustling markets of Kinshasa or Brazzaville, the rhythm of their words echoes the very same logic their ancestors used centuries ago. Even the music that rises from the river's banks, the drums, the guitars, the voices, carries the same timeless pulse of movement and exchange that has defined this place for millennia. The Congo is not just a river. It is the very bloodstream of Central Africa. Its waters nourish not only the land, but also language, memory, and meaning itself. Think about what this means. The river you see today holds the same rhythm it has for thousands of years. The same mist that rises each morning once touched the faces of those first merchant families. The same sound of water lapping against a canoe once lulled an exhausted rower to sleep under the stars. The same moon that glimmers on the Congo tonight once shone down on the very first pacts of trade and trust. In this incredible continuity lies the secret strength of African history. It doesn't need to shout to survive. It flows quietly, like water under the roots of ancient trees, nourishing the unseen. And though so much has been forgotten, the songs, the roots, the old dialects, the essence remains. Connection, the same principle that guided traders centuries ago, still guides the people who live along its banks today. The methods of trade have changed, the names have changed, but the fundamental rhythm of exchange, of giving and receiving's eternal. If you ever have the chance to stand by the river at dusk, you might feel it too, that subtle vibration beneath the stillness. It is as if the Congo itself is breathing through time, exhaling its memories into the evening mist. And in that breath, if you listen closely enough, you will hear a powerful message. We were never lost. We have always been moving. That is the true spirit of the Congo. A current that refuses to be still, yet never, ever forgets where it comes from. So tonight, as you drift toward sleep, imagine those canoes again. Imagine the steady, rhythmic dip of paddles in the dark water, the scent of wet wood and palm oil, the hum of traders' voices blending with the nightly chorus of frogs and cicadas. Imagine the warm glow of torches reflecting on the water and the silhouettes of people who once made this powerful river their entire world. They are still there in memory, in rhythm, in every single drop of water that flows past. They remind us that true wealth was never only in gold or ivory. It was in the act of connection itself. Every trade, every song, every gesture of trust was a small, profound declaration of humanity. I see you. I depend on you. We are both part of this flow. And perhaps that is the greatest secret the Congo ever kept, that the river doesn't just carry people, it binds them. Thank you for joining us on this journey. If you found this story meaningful, please like, share, and subscribe for more explorations into the heart of our world. You are now under baobab skies.